Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I have a review for you of a knife that I never thought I'd have on the channel, and that's this guy right here. This is the Stan Wilson non-flipper flipper. Before I go any further, I want to thank from the bottom of my heart my buddy Stanley for sending this guy along. It's not Stan Wilson, it's a different Stanley, but in fact my buddy Sid put me in touch with him. He and I talked a little bit, Stanley and I talked a little bit, and he said he was willing to loan this guy my way. That is a huge amount of trust that he's put in me. It's an absolutely wonderful thing. And so, although by the time this goes live, it'll be back home with its owner, this is a knife that I never thought I was going to have on the channel, always wanted to, and now here it is. So that's a beautiful thing. Next thing, in the name of tradition, let's do a size comparison, right? Here it is against the Spyderco PM2 and your Spyderco Delica. This is not a small knife whatsoever. It is reasonably long. The blade is about 3.6 inches and change here. Yeah, thereabouts. And it is actually a relatively thick knife as well. If we compare it here to the PM2, it is thicker than the PM2 by a pretty good margin. This is not a small knife. And then here it is against, of course, here Ontario Rat number 2. So you can see here, this is a much bigger knife. But yeah, so that's your size comparison here. This is not tiny. Next thing, a couple of other provisos, so to speak. This is not a knife that I've done a disassembly on, and I won't be doing a disassembly on it for a few reasons. A, proprietary hardware. We'll come back to that later, but it is also a hidden hardware design. You can see here that there is no hardware on the front or frankly on the back of it aside from the pivot. And in fact, if we look inside here, you can see, although maybe just barely, because it's very well done, but there is little holes in there, and inside those holes are little tiny Torx bits. And so, in fact, what this has is what you need to do to take this guy apart is you have Torx bits that have a little tiny sticking up Torx thing attached to a larger wrench, so you can kind of get in there and do one of these things with it. And that allows you to take this knife apart. But otherwise, this is not disassemblable. And so I'm not going to try and disassemble it because, well, I'd be more likely to hurt it than anything. So there you go. Next little bit of proviso, I haven't carried this guy very much. This is a very expensive, very rare knife. And so I wasn't going to just, throw it in the pocket and get on the bus. No, I carried this guy out to dinner very carefully. I didn't, do any batoning, no boxes in it. Well, okay, it handled an envelope or two for me. But, I was very careful with this guy. So this is based on a little bit less usage and a whole lot more fidgeting than my normal kind of thing. And then finally, a quick note for the people who I know are going to be, oh my God, when I get to the price point, this is pretty expensive and actually a pretty rare knife. These don't go up for sale very often. But when you see them out and about, I mean, the table prices is someplace from the $3,000 to $5,000 range. And when you see them up on the secondary market, they can easily be $5,000 to $8,000. Depending on the materials. This is an exceptionally rare knife and an exceptionally expensive one. So don't look at this as, oh, do I buy one? Well, probably not. But look at this is an amazing piece, and I'm going to talk about that. So let's go on ahead and jump into the full good, great, the bad, and the ugly of a knife I never thought I'd get to say this about, the Stan Wilson non-flipper flipper. So, on the good side, to start with, honestly, it's a pretty knife. It's a very pretty knife, and it's got a lot of nice design touches. In addition to a very nice, masterfully done grind here, complete with a beautiful hollow ground swedge on the top there, it is just a beautiful knife, generally speaking, with this carbon fiber here, which is just great, as well as the look of it, the bolsters, every part of this. This is a much more subtle version of a lot of the non-flipper flippers, but it is just a knife that is aesthetically beautiful in my estimation. I like the look of this knife a whole lot, and to me, that's a beautiful thing. Next thing, I do like the hidden hardware on this guy, although I would certainly prefer a standard Torx there, as well as the inclusion of the tool to disassemble it. I think I'm willing to let it slide in this particular case, but the thing is, inside there, you got the little Torx holes, and you can take this guy fully apart. This is not a knife that's epoxied together. It's just a knife that's cleverly assembled. So hidden hardware is a neat little trick, and it's a sign of mastery, even if it is a little bit of a pain in the neck to take it apart later on. So that's great. Next thing, this is a knife, the Stan Wilson non-flipper flipper that is, that has a bunch of beautiful materials available. If you look at Stan Wilson's Instagram, you will see these guys in these just amazing configurations. He has one in full Damasteel, where the entire thing is just solid Damasteel, and it's just like, oh my God. And, beautiful like Mokutai. If you are a materials fan, Stan's got you covered. There were a lot of the beautiful ones out there. This is actually, I like this one in that it's kind of more of a low-key knife. It's like a sleeper in the car racing scene. It doesn't look like it's going to be super fast, but oh my God. Similarly, this doesn't look like it's going to be something that amazing at first, but it is absolutely just It's a cool freaking knife. And so that's a beautiful thing. Next thing, the parts on this is just a beautifully finished knife. I mean, if we look at this, the stone washes and things like that are uniform. There are no gaps whatsoever here along these bolsters. The clip is beautifully done. You can see here the swedge and all of these grinds are absolutely gorgeously done here. Pop this guy open for you. The beautiful matching along the back spacer here and a beautifully satin finished back spacer. A nice, just every damn part of this thing is done to perfection. This is a masterwork. I mean, and I don't say that particularly lightly. I mean, I am a custom knife skeptic in many ways, but Stan Wilson is one of the custom makers where you look at it and you're just like, yeah, that's why people buy handmade custom knives. And actually, that's another thing to highlight about this guy, is that on my channel, most of the time, if I do have a custom knife, it's a CNC-made custom. These are things like the Holt Spectres, the Grimsmo Norsemans, the Koenig Aries, and some would argue those are just production knives, but still, that's normally my shtick. But this is a knife that has been made entirely by hand, at least to the best of my knowledge. Stan Wilson works on these guys by hand, and he's still getting these levels of fit and finish and perfection and whatnot. And that is actually something that's very impressive. And actually, I will say that there's something to seeing work by a maker who is as well known as this. I mean, Stan Wilson is basically a wizard. I mean, if you look at him like, yeah, you're probably a wizard. But I mean, independently of that, he's one of the makers that is regularly mentioned as being one of the acknowledged greats in the knife world. And so there is definitely a joy to knowing that, this is something that took his time. And so I'm not a handmade custom person, but I can kind of get it in this particular case. And so that's a beautiful thing. You can also see deep inside of the handle scale here. Hopefully, I'll be able to get that. There you go. If we zoom in a little bit, you can see his signature right there. Here, I'll try and make it. There you go, Stan Wilson. That is the name of the person who made this knife. It is signed with what looks to be an engraving tool, which is kind of an awesome little touch. It's a little thing, but considering that the rest of the knife is completely bare of any other markings, this is absolutely a beautiful thing. Next thing, the grind on the blade is actually pretty damn good. I mean, it's very easy on these art knives to end up with a grind that's like, oh, wow, yeah, well, I guess we put an edge on it. But no, in reality, this is a pretty impressive grind, not only in its technical accuracy, because, like, holy crap, this line between swedge and blade, and the fact that it's well repeated it's just good. It's just really freaking good. But also, it comes to a nice thin edge. What's the steel here? I honestly don't know. But this is also not a knife that you're going to be out there, breaking down boxes with in all likelihood. So, you know what? It's totally fine. Whatever. That's kind of the nature of the beast. This is a fundamentally different knife than I generally recommend. Next thing, this guy is a knife with a beautiful action. We'll talk a little bit more about the nature of that action, and actually just to keep the mystery up, yeah. Check that action. That's absolutely beautiful. And then on the close side, this is drop shot in a way that's just, like, ridiculous. There is a little bit of a second hole there. I believe that's for the detent in there. But it is absolutely, in practical use, a finger guillotine. The action on this is amazing. And the action even on the bolsters is very amazing. This has just an excellent, excellent action. This is 100% reliably deploying. There is absolutely no question as to how this knife works. And considering that it is a flipper that is not a flipper, well, honestly, it's a pretty impressive affair. And so I have to say, I'm very, very impressed by the action on this guy. And so all of that together is what I'm considering to be the good, is that it has a really excellent action. It has a beautiful blade grind. It is handmade by one of the greats of the knife-making world. It is beautifully finished. It is signed by the maker. It has just some amazing materials available in some of these, as well as some more everyday carry-friendly sleeper sort of builds. The hidden hardware thing is very cool, and it is a beautiful, beautiful design. The great thing about this guy, though, is the mystery that I've kept concealed so far, and that is the action. So, how does this knife work? This is a flipper knife. There is no flipper tab, and in fact, unlike some, there were knives with flipper tabs that are a little bit, trickier to find. They're like slung on the bottom, like Elijah Isham will do things like that from time to time. No, this is a flipper. But the problem is, how do you flip it? Well, like this. Right there, you notice? Yeah. That's the trick. And then how do you close it, for that matter? It doesn't look like there's any closing mechanism. It's not a liner lock. There's no frame lock or anything like that. How do you close it? Well, that's easy too. All you need to do is that. Now the knife is closed. Okay, here's the magic. See here how these little guys here, I'll pop the knife open so you can see. These bolsters here have this little rounded area. What that allows is for these bolsters to rotate. See that? That's cool. So this bolster is actually spring-loaded, and it rotates out of position. And when it rotates out of position, I'll see if I can show this off here. I'll put a little light on the subject from another angle here, then you should be able to see this. So if we look inside of there, beautiful. What you can see is that as I pull this bolster back, there's a little rod basically in there that is moving along. And that little rod, as I release the bolster, slides back into position. But basically, when I pull this bolster back, like this, what it's doing is it's pressing up against the bottom of the blade right here. And then it's springing the blade open. It's overcoming some detent in there. And I suspect there's like a spring-loaded detent or something like that in there. And that is enough force to allow this blade to pop out. So when I pull this like this, you'll see... wrong side. Can I do it this way? Yeah, I guess I can. Yeah, so I just pull it open and that fires the blade open. Now, how do you close it? This knife is actually, believe it or not, just a backlock. At a very real level, there is nothing different about this knife from a backlock, except in the way that you can let it go. In fact, you can pop it open like a conventional backlock. If you press down right here, up against this groove, check this out. You need to press a little hard there. That actually lets you disengage the blade. So it is a backlock fundamentally. But this bolster rotates as well. Not very much. It's a very, very subtle backlock. But as I rotate this bolster, you are going to see, here we go, that that the backlock bar rotates up and out. So what you can do is just gripping the knife normally, you can use your thumb and you can just press down here. And as you do so, they'll reach a certain point. You'll see the blade disengage. There you go. And now at this point, the knife is able to unlock. It is completely and totally solid. There is no blade play. There is no nothing here. It's an absolutely solid lockup until you press the magic button, in which case the knife can come closed. You're not really at risk of doing that because you'd have to be choked way up here and you'd have to be doing rotational force on this guy. So I think it's a perfectly safe mechanism. Most of the time you're going to be pressing down here anyways, but it is just an absolutely amazing, approach. There is really nothing else like it out there. And it's completely smooth too. I mean, not only is the blade smooth in coming out, but these here are completely smooth. The bolsters themselves feel like they're on bearings independently and are absolutely this is just such a damn cool action. It's absolutely amazing. The fact that you have here what is basically a backlock, but what is also a flipper that doesn't have a flipper tab, and in fact is pretty difficult to open for any human who doesn't know the trick. And by the way, you can just pull it out if you'd rather, but that is so damn cool. This is something that no one else is doing. I have seen literally nothing else remotely like this. And that's absolutely spectacular. I'm fangirling a little bit here. I'm going to completely admit that. But this is one of the coolest opening and closing mechanisms on any pocket knife that has frankly ever existed. And at the first time I saw the existence of one of these guys, actually on Jim Skelton's channel, he had a video on one of these way back when, it was like, oh my God, A, how does that work? And B, how do I get one? Then I looked at the price, then I realized I would never own one, but at the same time, holy crap, is it cool. So the fact that this is just using a rod to throw the blade out, and this is just using another rod to lift that up out of there, it's so simple, but damn it works amazingly. And so to me, the fact that it is a non-flipper flipper and that it uses this really unique mechanism is what's great, 1000%. And that makes this a great knife. So on the bad side, there is always bad in things. Proprietary hardware. I can't get through here without dinging for that. Guys, really? I mean, I get that this is probably a very difficult stack of parts to make, because on this side certainly, or I'm sorry, on the flipper side certainly you have a spring that returns the bolster to its natural position. If I do this, it just pops back into place. And so I can see him wanting to, make sure people don't screw this up, and I don't actually have a good sense of the complexity of everything in there. I wouldn't be shocked if there was a ball detent either on an armature or pushed up against here with a spring, but either way, I mean, I can see it being a little tricky to take apart, but nevertheless, I wish this came with a Torx bit and instructions rather than the other approach. Next thing, this is a recurve blade knife. You can see here this has a beautiful little recurve in it. I think it's an attractive attractive look to it, and in practice, the sharpened portion of the blade isn't actually recurved. You can see here that it is unsharpened up until about here, and that is, as I'll talk about in a little bit here, just so that you can catch this guy as you're doing the unlocking mechanism, whatever. But the recurve is going to be a little difficult to sharpen. You need to very specifically either use some kind of a rod-based system, or actually, one thing that a lot of people don't know about is that you can use just like a ceramic mug or something. Like this is a little IKEA plate here, and so actually all you really need to do to sharpen this guy is to take it, and then you align this at the very bottom of the recurve, and here, let's show you. No, I wasn't actually going to do that, but I did just make like 1,000 people cringe, and so that amuses me. Be very careful sharpening this because, yeah, that's a thing. Oh, actually, that does bring us... Sorry, I couldn't resist trolling you guys. That does bring us to the next point here, which is that there is this unsharpened portion down here. Like I said, you can see here that it doesn't actually get sharp until right up about this area. Now, this is almost certainly to allow you to do this, because as you're unlocking the blade, you want it to fall down onto your finger, which allows you to then get your finger out of the way and shut it the rest of the way. I think it's a really graceful approach, but there is definitely a big chunk of unsharpened blade. I get it, but it's also not ideal. One thing I will say, though, to his credit, many makers, when they do something like that, stop sharpening. They stop putting a bevel on there, down at the bottom. But what you can see here is that actually it looks uniform. It's until you rotate it in this way that you realize that that part's not sharpened, because he's continued to place a bevel. Even though it's not actually sharpening the knife, he has put a bevel of the same angle onto the blade all the way up to the edge there. So that really hides that very, very effectively. It's really, really cool. And so I like the fact that even if it is unsharpened down here, and this is to help this part of the mechanism work, it is, nevertheless, it looks a lot better than a lot of those other ones where they just kind of stop at a certain point. Next thing, this is a very heavy knife. This is exceptionally heavy. We are coming in here at 7.9 ounces for a little bit over 3.5 inches of blade. There is no universe in which this is lightweight. It is a big knife. It's got a lot of steel in it. Got a very thick blade here. Thick blade stock's another thing we could put in the bag here, but again, art knife, so okay. And it comes to a nice thin edge. But anyways, it is a very, very heavy little piece here, making this guy a little bit of a drag on the pocket. That's for damn sure. Next thing, the bolster on this guy. So you are using this bolster here to unlock the knife, and you can see, in fact, that there is an area here where the bolster is cut away so that you can fully get in there and deploy the knife. But that's actually a little bit sharp. It's a little bit hooky, right? At some level, I kind of get it, and it gives you a little bit of extra leverage here, having that out of there. But I also, at some level, wish there were another approach. It makes it stealthier, and certainly it looks good. But it's definitely something that after flicking it about 1,000 times over the course of 3 days, you start to feel a little bit. I'm going to have a little bit of Stan Wilson pain for a little while. It's like Shabazz at thumb, but hey, it's cool. Next thing, this guy is very, very expensive and very hard to get. Like I said, table prices, my understanding is they're 3,000 to 5,000, and then on the aftermarket you're looking at 5,000, 8,000. And at the time of looking around, I spent maybe 20 minutes this morning trying to find one of these for sale, just so I could have a price for the channel. And I didn't find one for sale. The books for these guys are years and years deep. A lot of people are on his books for these, and it's a beautiful thing, but at the same time, yeah, that's these are not going to be easy to get, and that's part of the reason why I don't generally look at these kind of customs, but yeah. So it's very, very expensive. That said, looking at this guy, it's completely unique. You are literally not going to find this action, this locker, this approach in any other knife in the world, so at some level, comparison shopping's hard, but it is also done by an incredible maker. It's handmade. It is really, really well done. This is one of those things where you may disagree that it makes sense to pay that much for a knife. In the same sense, you may think, oh, you're insane to pay more than $50 for a watch. But that doesn't mean I can look at this and say, wow, that was lazy. That was ugly. You shouldn't do that, Stan. Bad Stan. No. I can see why somebody would pay $5,000, and I really, truly, genuinely wish I were in a position to do so as well. So, it's very, very expensive, and it's hard to get, and all of that together is the bad. That it's expensive, it's hard to get. The bolster here is a little bit on the pointy side, leading to a bit of Stan Wilson finger. It is very heavy. It has an unsharpened blade heel, although, again, that does make sense for this closing approach. It is recurved, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to sharpen, and it has proprietary hardware, which not a big fan of. On the ugly front, this isn't about this knife particularly, but it is ugly that there is no production version of this lock. I actually got a chance in 2017. One of my very first Blade Show. One of my favorite experiences was that I met Stan Wilson. Absolutely fangirling moment. Oh my God, Stan Wilson. Oh my God. But anyways, I asked him about, and he actually showed me how the knife worked with one that he had right there with him. That was cool. But anyways, I asked him, Stan, are you doing this in a production form? And he said, a couple of folks had talked to me about it, but no one was able to pull it off in a, cost-effective way or something along those lines. Don't quote me on that. But nevertheless, he said that he thought about it, but no one had pulled it off yet. And my response to that is, come on, production world, make it happen. This would be an amazing challenge for one of the high-end production companies out there, and we've got a bunch. Like Rayot, I think We Knives maybe, Koenig Knives, Chris Reeve. Any of those folks could do this. I think it's possible. I think they can make it happen. It would probably be a pain in the neck, and it would probably be very, very expensive, but I would love to see them try. If anybody can pull this off, this is a low-hanging fruit to really blow away a number of people in the knife community. And I really desperately hope that somebody out there watches this video and then reaches out to Stan Wilson, because if you do it otherwise, you're just a cloner. But reaches out to Stan and gets the permission to make it happen, or collaborates to make it happen, because my God, do we need these in a production form. This is such a cool idea, and it's a little sad to me that it's languishing in the custom world. I mean, it's cool, but I'd love to see this widely available. So to me, at least, that's ugly. I really, really genuinely wish that there were a production version of this out there. So final conclusions. One of the things that I comment about most often on the channel, maybe not most often, but is uniqueness, right? There are so many knives that go on out there these days that are made that are just like, why did you do that? There's nothing unique. There's nothing new about it. It's just like, wow, that's another knife-shaped object. Cool. Okay. This is not that. This is absolutely and totally unique in the knife game. It is built, it has a locking mechanism. I mean, you could argue it's a back lock, but the way that it works is fundamentally unlike anything else on the market. The quality on it is basically beyond reproach. This is the kind of thing where Stan Wilson, I think, is one of those makers where he's at that level where, although there are plenty of people who are different, I'm not sure that there are makers who are better. I mean, people can have arguments about this back and forth, but the thing is, we are working in little tiny gradations of excellence here that, Stan, he is one of the makers I would consider in the highest echelons of the custom knife making game. So this is absolutely 100% an astounding knife, and I feel like it is a gem. For what it is 100%, in many ways, it's everything I'd hoped that it would be, even knowing what it is. But the thing is, you have to know what it is, because if you look at this from a certain perspective, it's going to be problematic. It's from an everyday carry perspective. Most of the time on my channel, I talk about, is this a good tool for your everyday life? And I don't think that's quite what this is, because it's got things like proprietary hardware, hard to shop and grind. You got this little gap down here. It's got a very heavy construction to it, and a price that is beyond most people. Frankly, it's well beyond me. And so as a result, this is probably not going to be the knife I recommend to everybody for EDC. It's not like we're going to be having the discussion, oh, Nick, what knife should I get? Well, I don't know. It comes down to either the Ontario Rat No. 2 or the Stan Wilson non-flipper flipper. No. They're entirely different beasts here. So this is an absolutely wonderful piece, but it's not exactly an everyday carry piece. And like I said, this is a knife that is begging for a production version. I mean, one of the best production makers in the world could pull this off. I have faith. They could create this form in a form that's, maybe hundreds or maybe, low thousands, and be more widely available for people. With all the precision of modern CNC, I really hope that that would be a possibility, and I think it would be an instant hit, providing something that would excite a lot of folks, something new in the knife world. I really, really hope that Stan is open to something like this, and that some maker decides to be brave and to pull it off. I mean, in a more production-y sort of way. That would be astounding. And so, those are that's kind of my desire. I really hope someone makes it happen. But, a lot of people have asked, well, Nick, what do you think? What are your final conclusions? Well, okay, first off, I'm thrilled to have spent time with it. I mean, I'm very privileged to be in a position where people will send me very expensive knives to check out. That's amazing, and I owe my buddy Stanley no small debt for checking this guy out. This is absolutely amazing. Thank you, Stanley. I'm also, it was a joy to handle, even, whatever briefly, for a few days of flipping and use. I feel like for me that That's great. That's what I needed. Secondly, my impression is that this is an art knife. I talk often about, the fact that, like I said, functional tools, but this is really favoring the art of knife making over daily practicality. There will not be, I'm pretty sure, there will not be a point throughout the rest of my life where I think to myself, oh man, I really wish I had the Stan Wilson non-flipper flipper on me right now for this task. It's not like there's a certain, kind of foam cutting, a certain kind of box opening. I'm not going to be breaking down cardboard boxes on a concrete floor with my non-flipper flipper. That's, by the way, ergonomics are good to go. I didn't even mention that. But I'm not going to be doing that with this knife because that's not what this is freaking about. It doesn't lessen that piece. I'm not saying that, oh, wow, it's terrible functionally, but it just contextualizes it. This is a piece to be enjoyed as a tribute to the art of knife making. That sounds really pretentious, maybe even more so than I normally am, and that takes doing. But this is not an everyday tool so much as it is a piece of like, holy crap, look what a true master of knife making can pull off. And I think that's enough. Third, one of the very common questions I got when I posted this guy up on Instagram was, well, Nick, is it just a gimmick? And yes, but that doesn't matter. Because to me, a gimmick implies a lack of substance, right? A gimmick says there is one thing that's kind of fancy about this, but at the same time, everything else is like, But the thing is, I don't think that's the case. It is certainly the case that the non-flipper flipper is a little bit of a gimmick sort of thing, right? There are other ways to open a knife just as effectively. I think it's really cool, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is the way all knives should be opened. It's cool. I'd love to have one, but yeah. The thing is, though, this has everything else, too. For me, a gimmick is something where they've created something crazy, and then the rest of it is just like, eh. This has both that as well as the fact that it's just a beautifully made knife. And so at some level, maybe it is a little gimmicky, but at another level, the knife is well enough made that it doesn't matter. It is an astoundingly good knife, even if that's the case, and so I don't really think that's the relevant question. Then the thing everyone's asking me is, Nick, so when are you buying one? I don't think I am. And that's not because I wouldn't carry it. I mean, that's a part of it. It would be really hard for me to do that. I would have trouble with, I've talked about the cost carry comfort curve before on the channel. It's like there's a certain point where it's like too expensive for you to actually consider carrying. And this is way above it. I'm more conservative with other people's stuff on loan, certainly, but still. I would really, I think, have trouble carrying this around in my pocket and using it to open boxes in cut foam. Even if it would work fine for that, I would struggle to have a user Stan Wilson non-flipper flipper. And so as a result, I also, let's be real here, California real estate, I can't afford a non-flipper flipper right now. But anyways, so I'm probably not going to buy one of these guys. I'm thrilled to have spent as much time with one as I just have here. And if somebody wants to hand me one, I'll give you my P.O. box, but I digress. But this is probably not going to be something I pick up. It's an absolutely amazing piece. I'd love to have one, but I don't think I will just for practical, boring reasons. But the thing is, this remains one of the most impressive and unique knives I have ever had on this channel. Flat out. And I say that with no hesitation. There is very little out there in the world that comes anywhere near this in terms of build quality, and then there's absolutely nothing in the world out there that comes anywhere near this in terms of that approach, in terms of the non-flipping. This is it. This is the only thing out there. It is an amazing piece. It is a nice reminder of why custom knife people buy custom knives, and it is 100% a beautiful thing. So Stanley, thank you very much for showing this to me. Stan, thank you very much for making this, please, production, please, so I can afford one someday. And everybody else, I hope you found this interesting, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.